Hi, it's Sherri from A Quilting Life, and I'm here today for my happy-go-lucky sew-along. Finally, I first shared this quilt with you, I believe, last July 2022, and immediately got lots of requests for a sew-along, and I said, sure, definitely, we will do a sew-along when the fabric comes out. And then unbeknownst to me, we got another collection thrown in the mix, and with the holidays and everything, and by the time the collection shipped, I was already fast at work sewing with our Bountiful Blooms collection, which you've now seen, but just couldn't do the sew along then. So let everybody know that was reaching out that we would do it this summer, and here we are. It is June 1st, and we are starting the Happy Go Lucky sew along. And first, I really want to also say thank you to Kimberly Jolly at the Fat Quarter Shop. She actually reached out. She also wanted to know when the sew along was going to begin, and she asked if she could borrow the quilt, and she shared it on her live stream with her viewers, and I was just really, really appreciative of that. So hopefully we have a really nice group sewing along, and today we're just going to ease into it. We're going to get started. We're going to talk about the fabric requirements, about scrap quilts, about some of the things I did with my quilt, and then I'm going to give you a really, really easy sewing assignment for this week. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, and just a couple more things before we get started. I will be sharing these videos on Thursdays in June, and I'm not exactly sure yet if we'll need 4 Thursdays or not, or just 3. So we'll kind of play that by ear as we go along. I do plan on sharing other things with you that are kind of related to what we're talking about for the sew along each week. So we will just see how that goes. But definitely we're going to be 3 Thursdays and possibly a 4th. Okay, first I'm just going to talk about some things that I did in the quilt. This is a fat quarter friendly quilt. If you notice on your pattern, it says 1 fat quarter bundle, but in parentheses it said it should contain 25 medium or dark fat quarters and 13 light or low volume fat quarters. So, and that was because I designed this with the Simply Delightful bundle in mind, and you can see that it has a lot of these low volume prints, or at least prints that have a lot of white background. If you don't have that many prints that you want to incorporate, you can definitely do half yards. So if you could do 7 half yards if you wanted of light fabrics, or if you just want to use 1 fabric, 3.5 yards. So mix it up however you want and incorporate as many kind of low volume-ish prints as you want to. I will show you just a few examples that show up right here. So this churn dash block, I used a really light low volume background. Now this 9-patch block right next to it has a busier light print, and I interchanged them throughout the quilt. This one's kind of in between these two. So this is really busy, very light, and kind of medium busy. But I used those low volume prints for almost every single block here and there. So this one has a tone on tone background, so I mixed those in as well. So that's just something to think about while you're choosing your fabrics. And when I wrote the pattern, I wanted it to work for fat quarters in the bundle that I used, of course, but I also wanted to make it really accessible for you to be able to just choose fat quarters and backgrounds from your stash. Okay, so as you will notice, there are 3 different types of blocks in this quilt. There are churn dash blocks, there are 9-patch blocks, and these 3 actually have the light outer corners, but if you look right here, you'll see that we also have 9-patch blocks that have the darks in the outer position. So you're going to be making, it's about 50% of each type of 9-patch block. that we're going to make, and where you place them is all up to you. There isn't really a particular placement as far as, okay, put the dark outer corner 9 patch here and then light. I feel like I did alternate quite a bit, but sometimes I didn't, just because for me it was more important to have the colors, a good mix of colors, than to really worry about where I was putting the 9 patches with the dark outer corners or the light outer corners. Okay, and then is this one in the shot too? Great. So we also have a sprinkling of stars. And I really owe this to my quilter. I think maybe I might have mentioned it when I first shared about this quilt, but when I originally designed the quilt, it was all 9 patches and churn dashes. And she said, Sherri, this is my friend Mary, and she said, Sherri, it would be kind of fun to just, why don't you put 3 star blocks in there just for fun? And so I did. I added 3 sawtooth stars into my quilt. Now, if I were making this again, I think I might add a few more. I really like the stars. I really like how there aren't as many stars as there are 9 patches and churn dash blocks. But I think I would add 5, 7, maybe even 9 stars. There are a lot of blocks in this quilt. There's no sashing. And so I think it would be fun to have 7 or 9. I don't think I would go any more than that, but they are fun to make, and so I just wanted to give that to you as an option because you're going to be making the star blocks first. So one more thing I wanted to point out with this star block is that all 3 of the sawtooth star blocks that I made I used the same fabric for the center square as I did for the flying geese. Now, you might want to kind of mix it up, especially if you're making 5 or 7. You could kind of switch out the center squares from one with another, so it would make it even more scrappy. So just a thought for you on that. And now I want to get into a few of the specifics from inside the pattern real quick. Okay. Now I'm going to talk about cutting for just a minute, and I also want to point out we shifted the quilt just slightly, and so I've got one of the other stars here. So, and I really feel like this is a good distance, to have them apart, but the quilt, it's 75 by 75, and so, or 79.5 by 79.5, so you've got plenty of room to add in some more stars if you want to add in stars. Okay. The stars are actually the last block that you make according to the pattern, but I did want to let you know that now. And you will have plenty of fabric to make extra stars. The way the cutting instructions are set up is by fat quarters. You will find out that and actually the first block in the pattern is the 9 patches, and we will be talking about those next week. But it tells you how many strips to cut of darks and lights from each of your fat quarters, whether they're a dark or a light, for your 9 patches. So if you are going to make your stars first and you're using all fat quarters, you could go ahead and just cut those strips from your fat quarters and set them aside. Just put them in a separate bag or something that says 9 patches. So you could definitely do that. And then you could also at the same time go ahead and cut the strips that you need for your churn dash blocks and put them in a separate bag or box that says churn dash. Because the way I wrote the pattern is then you take all your scraps and you make your star blocks. So if you want to be absolutely certain that you're going to have those prints that you want left over, I would really recommend just cutting the strips for your 9 patches, separating them in a box or bag, and then cutting the strips for your churn dashes, separating them in a box or bag, and then deciding, okay, now I'm going to make 3 scars just like the pattern, or maybe I'm going to make 5, or maybe I'm going to make 7 or 9. You will have plenty of leftover fabric. You are really only using, for most of the fat quarters, about 12 inches of the 18 inches before you make the stars. So that is your assignment for this week. I would suggest cut all of your strips for your 9 patch blocks and cut all of your strips for your churn dashes and then make your stars. And I will have a printable, and it has a little thing that you can color in for 9 patches for churn dashes and for stars. Now, if you're going to make extra stars, you will want to go ahead and color in some of those churn dash or 9 patch little icons so that you don't end up making too many of those if you're worried about that. But we're going to do lots of fun strip piecing for these other blocks, so they're going to go a lot faster. You're going to have a lot more blocks to make in the next week, but they go really, really fast. Star blocks are not chain piece, so that's why I thought, but there are fewer, so we'll start with them. And I also will link a blog post that I did, how to make a sawtooth star, and it has just some simple instructions. If you've never made this type of block before, you can always reach out and ask me any questions that you have. I just want to mention also that the stars, the directions are for making the flying geese for the stars the traditional way. If you want to size it up and use a block lock ruler or another ruler, you can do that. Just don't cut out your stars according to the pattern directions. If you're going to do that, cut it out according to your ruler directions. And you should be fine if you've already saved aside all of your strips for the 9 patches and the churn dashes. So happy sewing, get your fabrics collected. This week is basically just all about cutting and then making those star blocks. Okay, so that's it for week 1 of our Happy Go Lucky sew along. Be sure to get your printable to help keep track of your progress from my blog. We will have a link to that in the description below. And get your fabrics chosen, and you can start cutting as we talked about. And you can sew those 3 blocks if you want, and as we talked about, you could do a few more. So the sewing this week is relatively light. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed today's video. Please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. Hit the like button and share it with a friend. Thanks so much for stopping by.